Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. No, BlueStar Nation has not become a poetry podcast.
I was going to say, do I need to start snapping like, ooh, yeah?
But you might.
Are we doing a
little scatting? Yeah,
little poetry reading
little poetry
session?
slam, yeah.
Yes, yeah, there you go.
Well, you might be wondering what Robert Frost has to do with the reseller channel and edge computing in particular.
Right.
Today we have Jeff Reedy from Scale Computing on the podcast to explain that. He'll have to explain it. I'm not going to be the one to explain it up front here.
It's a good explanation, though.
It is. It's a very good explanation. We'll be talking
brilliant.
VMware, how enterprises are dealing with a shift away from that platform. We're going to talk about the misconceptions of cloud and edge computing.
Yes.
And, that we can potentially capitalize on.
Yes.
I think we should
be
like
that opportunity.
On. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. I'm John Martin.
And I'm Dean Reverman.
Welcome to BlueStar Nation. BlueStar Nation podcast is brought to you by Elo. For a limited time, Elo is offering an instant rebate on select 70 series monitors. Known for their versatility, minimalistic design, and commercial-grade durability, 70 series monitors provide an elegant solution for businesses prioritizing quality and total cost of ownership. Elegant, I like that.
Elegant, yes.
Elegant solution.
We like elegance.
This rebate ranges from $31 to $47 on 22, 24, and 27-inch options for all VARs in the U.S. and Canada. All orders must ship within the promotional period, which runs through June 30th of 2025. That's coming up soon, so do not miss out on this special offer. Check out the link in the show notes for additional details and part numbers, or contact your BlueStar account manager to place an order. Again, this limited time rebate runs through June 30th, 2025. All right, our guest today is Jeff Reedy. He is the CEO and co-founder of Scale Computing.
Yes.
Jeff, welcome to the show. We're glad to have you. Give us a little bit of the background of Scale and maybe some of your history. How did you end up coming together with this company?
Yeah, so I'm actually one of the founders of Scale. I've been the CEO since its inception, and we've been in business now for about 17 years. So it's been quite a run. But I started the company actually to be primarily an alternative to VMware-based infrastructure, which has, in the last 2 years, has become suddenly a very cool place to be. So, and it was really this idea. The whole genesis of the company was this idea that we could use artificial intelligence technology. So I was doing AI long before it was cool, but it could use AI to really change the way that infrastructure was managed. Effectively, most problems in IT infrastructure are pattern recognition problems. Like you see some symptoms and then you have to go figure out what's going on. And AI is really good at that. Right. So we could use that to augment your team and really change the way things happened. And so we've been at it for a long time. And then, when my friends at Broadcom decided to acquire VMware and kind of put some of that into turmoil, it's really been an interesting spot to be. So,
no doubt. Yep. Well, let's talk about what's happening in the modern era of edge. And we like
to talk about edge all the time.
We do, yes. That's kind of a place where we live.
That's right.
Our
that's
channel
exactly right.
lives on the edge. So we had you as a guest speaker at one of our recent exec summits on retail and hospitality in Savannah, and you gave a fascinating presentation that kicked off with comparing the classic Robert Frost poem to edge computing. So can you give a little bit of, because this is one of those things I feel like if you were in the room and you heard it and experienced it, like it was a fascinating listen, and I feel like we need to share it with others. So explain a little more of that analogy, and why do you think it's relevant to this current era that we're in?
Yeah, I think, so it's the Robert Frost poem, The Road Not Taken, it's got the famous line at the end, two roads diverge in the wood, and I took the one less traveled by, right? And a lot of people misinterpret that poem to think that it's meant to kind of tell you to go your own way and do your own thing. And actually, the poem is not about the way that the traveler in the poem went. It's actually about the other road, which is why the title of it is The Road Not Taken. It's talking not about the road that the traveler took. Right. And it's really a poem about sort of ignoring what may seem like a gut instinct, right? Like very often, I mean, we all do it, right? You have a decision to make. You instinctively think one thing and then you overthink it, right? And you talk yourself out of it. And then, a week or a month or a year later, you go, oh God, I should have trusted my gut.
Yeah.
Right. Like we all do that.
That's right.
And
that's right.
that's really what, and that's really what this is about. And I think the reason I brought it up is because as it relates to edge computing, right, we're in this new era where applications are moving out to the edge. You've got the rise of AI and lots of other things kind of factoring it in there. And, I think everyone kind of can see it, especially with AI, or like, oh yeah, like I could run AI models at the edge, much less expensive and so forth. But then you maybe think, well, but maybe it's all going to stay in the cloud or this or that. And you can talk yourself out of it, and you'll miss the opportunity, right? And that's really what I was getting at with the poem, is that things are changing rapidly, and you kind of need to ride the wave, right? Don't overthink it, and don't think, oh, it's all going to happen in the cloud or what have you. So.
And it's a good metaphor because we talk about it all the time too. I mean, it is a changing landscape. I mean, we always talk about, we live on the edge. We've been here for a while. Now it's becoming sexy, to talk about the edge, and it's no longer in the rack room or in the cloud.
It's not just an Aerosmith
It's out on the edge. It's not just an Aerosmith song type of thing, but it's so true because, a lot of indecision is happening on the edge as well.
Right.
With a lot of chaos or instability becomes a lot of maybe non-decision making or waiting or seeing what's going to happen, and early movers are going to win, in some of these areas, and that's what we try to expose our ecosystem to. Is great to have scale computing there because they just offer a completely different vision. We'll get into that really, I think, marries well into our world and what a lot of our resellers are experiencing, and they need answers. When we did our customer advisory session afterwards, I mean, they were telling us, like, we need these types of solutions that we can now not only just monetize and create recurring revenue off of it, but really answer the needs that are happening on this ever-changing edge, which it clearly is.
Expand the business, too.
100%.
I mean, I think, this kind of does go back to the poem in a way. Like, safety, sure, you can get by on safety. Like, you can take that road, the more well-trodden road, and maybe you get by for a while. Maybe your business still sticks around for another 20, 30 years, could be. But you're probably not growing. You're probably not getting ahead. You're not really.
You're not addressing the market needs.
Yeah,
probably.
Exactly.
Right. So,
and you're likely just moving yourself closer to obsolescence at some point. I mean, and I would assume that anybody listening to this doesn't want to go down that path. I mean, hopefully you're not in that. They're like, whatever. I'm just going to coast to retirement and.
There are some people out there.
Maybe
we call them lifestyle VARs, where they built a business and they're just going to cruise for the next 5 years.
Maybe, I guess if you're not concerned about a legacy and you don't have to pass it on to anyone else and you don't really care, you get your what you want and get out. Fine. Yeah. But otherwise, I think most people are looking to figure out how do I keep myself from being obsolete? How do I keep up with what's happening and changing in a technological world that is constantly changing and moving? Would you agree, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, so us as a vendor in technology, or whether you're a distributor or a VAR partner, right? We're all technologists, and we like to think that we think about the future and we guide people to where things are going, but we're all subject to human nature, which is you kind of find a way of doing things, and people don't like change, right? They'll stick with it. And if you're not adapting to the change that is edge computing, you're just going to run yourself and your customers kind of into a wall, right? Like you're just going to do things the same old way. And, you kind of need to stay ahead of it. That's probably why people got into tech to begin with. Right. But we all create habits. Right. And this is one of those, this is an era changing opportunity. Right. The cloud, or the edge today is where the cloud was 15, 16 years ago. Right. When it was sort of nascent. And, if you think back, 15 years ago, if you had decided, let's ignore this cloud thing. Right, you'd be in real trouble. You're probably long gone, right? You wouldn't have made it. Right. And that's where we are now with the edge.
No different also than if you were ignoring the AI thing right now. There's a good chance you're also going to be in a lot of trouble down the road if you're just completely ignoring that too. Yeah. What were you going to say?
Well, one of the slides that he had in the presentation, which I thought was fascinating, is just this ebb and flow between centralized and distributed networks, right? Starting off with the mainframe. I'm stealing your slide, Jeff. I apologize. Starting off with centralized and mainframe, then decentralized with client server, back to cloud centralization, and his argument is now, the edge is now getting back to a distributed network and the need to have edge compute. And so, that wave is happening. And there's a lot of good reasons, which I hope we'll get into as to why that is happening.
Exactly.
So,
Well, Jeff, you mentioned VMware up front, obviously, and it's a big part of what your business is trying to address, and some monumental changes there. I admit this was kind of a part of the technosphere that I was not
we need
overly...
we need to hover on this because
Right.
I don't know that a lot of our customers even understand this world.
I wasn't
you got to
sure,
help us, Jeff.
Yeah, I wasn't sure about that either. If it was something like, is it just a me thing that I just don't know enough about this, or if in general a lot of people don't know a lot about it, even including people that work in this space. So explain, they are obviously this huge player in the cloud space that's rapidly changing. Tell us a little bit about what's happening there and how are enterprises dealing with these changes that are happening at that level.
Well, there's a lot of changes, right? And it's a culmination of many things happening at once. I mean, when you were referring to the slide where you have this oscillation back from distributed to centralized to distributed to centralized. I mean, what happens there is bottlenecks move around. I mean, this is just the nature of IT, right? I mean, you make adjustments based on where the current bottlenecks are. And, right now, one of the bottlenecks becomes things like, honestly, bandwidth and latency, right? If I'm going to run applications at the edge, maybe a computer vision model that's going to, tell me something in real time that's happening at a fast food restaurant or on a factory floor or what have you, you're in a situation where, microseconds might matter.
Yes.
Right. And so, one of my jokes is, when microseconds matter, the cloud is only 60 milliseconds away, right? Like it doesn't help.
It doesn't help.
And I've seen this in the real world. I mean, there's customers where there's a piece of machinery that needs to make a decision as to whether it's going to do A or B within less than a millisecond, right? Well, the first hop to the router in the building is a millisecond away, much less to the cloud from there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have that happening. And then on top of it, you have this situation with Broadcom and, VMware, generally speaking, was not necessarily an ideal solution for most kinds of edge deployments. Now, edge can mean lots of different things, right? But in many cases, when I'm thinking about edge, I'm thinking about environments where you're running applications that generally don't have IT staff on site, right? And VMware, as effectively an operating system for the data center, sort of assumes you've got a team of people with fancy letters after their name that can do stuff.
Right.
And that's they don't have that in McDonald's.
No.
Right.
That's right.
In the store. So so you need something a little different. And when Broadcom came in, well, now they started making all kinds of changes, which is, I can logically see why they would make such changes, but they're reducing product lines, they're raising prices, they're cutting out channel partners, they're doing all the kind of stuff that you might do if you're like, okay, well, it's the end of this era, and I'm going to do what private equity firms call profit harvesting, right? Which is drive out cost and raise profits. But that's the different view, right? If you're like, okay, well, VMware is not the solution for the edge, and the edge is where things are going. Well, that's what you would do. And it's what they've done before, and they make a lot of money with it. I'm not bad-mouthing their strategy, right? It's just it's not the right solution when you're thinking, how am I going to keep applications running in an environment where I don't have any IT professionals to do it? And that's kind of what Edge is all about. And if you think that there's, a lot of applications in the cloud, I mean, that's what's happening now with the Edge. I think one of the most common misconceptions about the edge is, well, I just don't have that many apps to run there, right? So you think of a retail environment perhaps, and okay, I've got the point of sale system, maybe I have traditional video surveillance and quote unquote that's about it, right? Well, all of a sudden you need an AI application and you need 3 more, and then you need this and that, and it is a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If you don't have infrastructure which is easy to manage at the edge, of course you don't deploy that many applications at the edge, right? It's too expensive to get them there. But if you can reduce the cost of deploying and managing those apps, all of a sudden you'll get 10 times as many applications as there. And this is actually exactly what happened with the cloud. That's why I referenced sort of that the cloud 15 years ago. Originally, all the big analysts like Gartner and so forth thought that the way that you would get applications to the cloud is you were going to actually move them there, right? You had apps in your data center and you would move them to the cloud. And some of that happened. But of course, today, 95% of the apps in the cloud were just written in the cloud.
That's
right.
right.
It wasn't that they moved there. It's
Right.
that the cloud was a new place to create apps, right? And that's what's happening at the edge. So.
Yeah, I mean, it is fascinating, and to our point, we don't really live in the IT world.
Right.
We're OT. We're
Right.
operational technology that's happening out on the edge, and so we're not. But we understand, there's a move there. So, and I guess we'll get into this about the move into the cloud, which when you talk about the edge, there's still going to be issues. There's, as you've already described, the latency issue, but let's hover on the cloud a little bit. So there's been a movement, right, over to AWS and Azure and all these things to throw your apps over there. And don't worry, because this is where the new world is going, but still over here. But still, that is that a truism? First off, you got kind of the meltdown of VMware to a certain degree, a lot of migration happening over to public cloud, right? To a certain degree.
No, that's absolutely true, right? And here's the thing, I think, a lot of times, again, it's a habit of technologists, and I'm guilty of it as anybody else, right? But when you think about there's a problem, it's easy to start throwing sort of technical decisions and solutions at the problem before you've fully defined what it is you're trying to accomplish, right? So the edge doesn't make the cloud go away any more than the cloud made the data center go away or the data center made the mainframe go away. All these things still exist, right? If you put yourself not in the shoes of a technologist, but the shoes of maybe the owner of the business or the franchisee who runs that McDonald's, right? They don't care if the app is running at the edge or in the cloud or in the data center, right? Like they don't probably even know what those words mean, right? Like they could care less. They do care that the app runs.
That's right.
Right. And doesn't screw up the operations. Right. And so, the right technologies are those that enable applications to kind of be wherever they should be. Right. Another classic thing that happens is, people start thinking I'm going to run in the cloud or the edge. And they think, well, now I need to decide, am I going to run virtual machines or containerized applications? I mean, again, who cares, right? I mean, there's technical reasons why you might do one or the other, but that's not the core of the problem. The problem is, I need containers at the edge or containers in the cloud or VMs or what have you, right? It's like, okay, where are the apps? Can I run the app? Can I keep the app up and running? And does it make business? And am I providing flexibility moving forward, right? So that not just this application, but the next one and the next one and the next one after that. And that's why I said when people think about the edge and they're like, well, I'm gonna put everything in the cloud because it's just so expensive to run an app out at the edge. And if you're doing it by putting people in vans and sending them out to 10,000 locations, that's pretty expensive, right? But if I can click a button like you would in the cloud and deploy an application to those 10,000 applications, that feels exactly the same, right? So it's a matter of perspective and understanding what you've got. So.
Yeah, and when I think about the marketplace, again, I think we've set the table pretty well, but just to reframe, you have a lot of different technologies that are now being affected at the store level. When you think about retail, hospitality, or healthcare at the actual entity, the hospital or whatnot, there's a lot happening on the edge.
Right.
And so it's a world where people need to start figuring out a strategy around how to do a technology stack and how to present that and what to manage. And so resellers are very interested in, because every reseller is to a certain degree an MSP. They would present themselves as that. At least most of them should be at this, doing some kind of managed service. But the more and more you get into there, the more and more you want to manage that stack. And I think that the more clarity you have around the platforms that you're deploying and what's happening at the edge and the advantages to all that, the better off you're going to be. Yeah. So anyway, it's definitely a shift that's happening in the marketplace.
Yeah. Jeff, you kind of talked about a little bit of the misconception there when it comes to edge, like that edge is meant to replace cloud and vice versa, and that you can't you need one or the other necessarily. Let's dive a little bit further into that. What other kind of misconceptions do you typically come across when people are talking about the edge versus cloud conversation. And where do you see that creating some opportunities for VARs and MSPs that want to go out there and meet these needs and figure out how to help people do more at the edge, but also acknowledge that like cloud is still part of the process as well?
Yeah, I think, there's several, right? But, one that comes to mind immediately is, sometimes people think that the edge computing is just another name for, remote office, branch office, on-prem computing, right? And that, while it's technically true that if you're at the edge, you're not in the data center, that's generally what it means. That's really underselling what the edge is all about. And one of the reasons, right, to circle back to that cloud point, one of the reasons people moved applications to the cloud was because it was just much easier to manage, right? Well, management of applications can be solved in lots of different ways. It's not that the cloud is just some kind of, panacea that fixes that. And the beauty of edge computing is it does give you effectively a private cloud. I mean, you're going to manage it more like a cloud, not like 10,000 remote offices, right? But you're going to manage it as sort of one big entity, right? And if you think of the challenges that exist in sort of management at that kind of scale, right? On one hand, you can think, oh, what if I had 10,000 servers in one location? I might need a certain kind of solution, but you might need a different solution if I have 10,000 servers at 5,000 locations, right? It just feels very different. The other thing is that the edge can very often be less expensive to run apps. And the most expensive part of the edge traditionally has been deployment of infrastructure and management of infrastructure. And so that's what companies like us have solved for, right? And having software that makes that easy. Once that's in place, doing things, and AI really brings this home, because the cost of using your own GPU to do AI is orders of magnitude less expensive than renting that same GPU in the cloud, right? I mean, it's probably 2 orders of magnitude different, right? And the technology there is changing so fast that there's no way that the cloud catches up anytime soon. GPUs are advancing today kind of like CPUs did in the late 80s and mid 90s, right? If I buy a GPU now, a year from now, I can buy the same GPU for half the price or a GPU that's twice as fast at the same price, right? So you're always kind of better off in that model, having your own stuff, right? And having that flexibility. So, it's those two. And the third one is what I already mentioned, which is the number of applications people will end up deploying at the edge is substantially higher than where they think about today.
Can we go back and hover on the cheaper? You had a really good analogy in your presentation around you as a gamer and what the cost would be relative if it was cloud. Can you run through that again?
Yeah. So I am a big gamer.
That was a great analogy to kind of frame it in people's mind because it's so true. But go ahead.
Yeah. So I am a big gamer, and what I showed there was, when I'm on the road, I often still play games, and my gaming platform of choice is a PlayStation. So I have a PlayStation 5 in my basement, and there's an app I can put on my laptop that allows me to connect to my PlayStation in my basement and play games as though I were there. I'm not using the public cloud or anything like that. I'm just streaming it from my own gear. Now, a PlayStation is an AMD computer, so it's got an AMD GPU in it. And when you're playing any modern game, it maxes out the GPU. And so it becomes a very nice analogy to AI applications, which also max out the GPU. And so if I remember right, I think the game I showed you guys was Harry Potter. I was playing Harry Potter, right? And it maxes out the GPU. Well, now you can just do the math. Hey, if I want to play Harry Potter 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in AWS, well, I can calculate the GPU cycles and the CPU cycles and the data that's going to go in and out. And the answer is, if I'm going to run it 24/7, it's about $3,000 a month to play Harry Potter, right? Alternatively, a PlayStation is $400 one time.
That's right.
Yeah. So $30,000 a year or $500, that's the difference, right? And it's fun to think about video games, but a gaming system is literally the same kind of thing you run AI apps on.
Yeah.
And you are going to run AI apps 24/7 in many cases, right? Whether it's, in retail, we see these, loss prevention, shoplifting detection type applications.
Yep.
But that's that kind of application to me is the gateway into exposing how you're going to get this explosion of apps at the edge.
Bingo.
Because, every retailer I talk to either is deploying or wants to deploy that app.
Yep.
But then they start thinking, oh, if I now have GPUs on site and cameras feeding those GPUs, I can start doing other things. I just had a conversation with at our conference with a customer who had that same app and realized, and it's a gas station chain, right? And they realized, oh, well, now that this infrastructure is in place, like what I could really use is an app that literally points a camera at where the hot dog roller is and tells people when to put more hot dogs out there.
Yep.
Because it's, right now they have an alarm that goes off and somebody rotates through and checks everything, right?
Right.
But while they're checking everything, they're not behind the counter, they're not engaging with customers, they're not doing that stuff. Right. And this is a very simple app, right? I mean, you could literally code this thing up in probably an afternoon to say, hey, you're low on hot dogs.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing. Now, in the traditional sense, if I'm like, hey, my hot dog app, right, I need to roll trucks out to 500 locations like this guy had and deploy. You would never do that.
You would never know.
But if you did it to put the shoplifting app in, and now you can add to it and you can add to it and you can add to it, right? You could come up with, I mean, literally in this discussion, he came up with a half dozen applications that he would like to run in the store that use computer vision and so forth. And they're all very simple. Inevitably, they'll make the store that much better. But you need that infrastructure in place. And again, you wouldn't spend $30,000 a year in Amazon to count hot dogs.
You absolutely would.
Yeah. But at least I wouldn't.
But the analogy, that's exactly the point. The point here is that there is change happening on the edge. When you have this misconception of, well, edge compute is expensive, it's more expensive than back at the cloud. No, when you think about the applications that are being tasked on the edge, it makes a lot more sense to do that. And of course, and thank you for weaving the narrative, Jeff, into the whole AI revolution, especially around machine vision, because you're going to see that in retail, you're going to see it in hospitality. We've had people like Pressy Taste. This is an application that is monitoring food quality on the edge using existing cameras that are already there. Well, how is this stuff going to happen? Well, it's got to happen on edge compute.
Yep.
And the other story we love is the latency factor, right?
Oh, yeah.
Dan Pierce on your team gave another good analogy. He was like, what was it? Would you want to drive an
autonomous vehicle? Would you want to drive an autonomous vehicle that when it was time to brake, a sudden braking?
Yeah, on the highway.
On the highway. Do you want it sending up to the cloud saying, hey, there's something in front of me. Should I brake? Yes, it's time to brake. In the time that it takes to do that, you've already ran into that other car.
That's right.
It has to happen a hell of a lot faster than that.
So when you
I thought that was a perfect analogy to help me understand what we were talking about.
Well, so machine vision's being used in warehouse applications for safety, worker safety, monitoring where devices are, and that has to happen in real time. I mean, milliseconds matter. So it's just a great illustration of the need to move a lot of this compute over. And I know that our customers, that our resellers are getting asked these questions. They're getting asked about everything that Jeff just said. When they walk into I don't care if it's a tier 1 retailer or a small retailer, tier 1 hospitality lower, they're all asking the questions around, how do we get AI out of this, or could be, to actionable? I need to start working on this stuff now. Jeff, can you relay one more story? Because you told a case study of a large retailer that you worked with. You helped them deploy using your scale compute box on the edge, where you were able to stand them up during an emergency, stand up their stores. But not only that, they were then able to add on facial recognition, loss prevention, all in the same boxes without we've all seen the IT room in any store or any, it's the 5 desktops strewn together. This one does video, this one does the point of sale, this one does the whatever, right? And it's all, can you just hover on or just tell us that story?
Yeah. And that customer of ours, it's a grocery store retailer. And, there's actually a couple of stories there, but one of them, is that, in part of it's ease of deployment, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
And that's right. The concept that, imagine, in this case, they had a unfortunate situation where, the store effectively burned down.
Yeah.
Right. And the store burned down in a neighborhood where it was kind of the only thing there. And so they wanted to get a store stood back up. Well, you can imagine in a traditional sense in your room full of, tower servers, right? I mean, it could take a couple of weeks for somebody to stand all that stuff up and get out there and do it. And in this case, right, not only did they have the scale infrastructure, which was just they were actually running on a piece of hardware called a NUC, which is a small kind of, 3x3 inch box. And they were running that full infrastructure. But, again, think of edge computing more like how your smartphone works, right? When your smartphone, if you need a new smartphone because you dropped it on the ground and smashed it or something, right? You buy the new phone and then it magically connects to the cloud, downloads all of its applications, puts them on there, right? When you're using the phone, I mean, that's kind of edge computing. The app is on the phone.
That's so true.
Right?
So true.
It's still linked to the cloud, right? Yeah. And everything is right there. And so, you wait an hour and all of a sudden your phone's back, right? And that's what they did. So they stood up, actually, these guys stood up a store in the parking lot under like one of those big white kind of wedding tents that you might rent. Right. The temporary building, put the infrastructure in place. It downloaded all the applications, set itself up, and they were up and running. So that was pretty cool. The other thing that these guys did, and I remember I relayed the story, is they had hired an intern from a local college. He was a data science kid. He was, I don't know, a sophomore or junior in college. And they had asked him, you only get an intern for 7 or 8 weeks. Right. And they just said, well, just data science, like, hey, take a look at data we've got here and see if you can find any trends that would be interesting. And he did 2 things. One, smart kid, he figured out that for all the customers in their stores, if they bought a bottle of wine, they were more likely to spend up to 30% on all other products in the store. Like basically you were a higher end shopper if you were buying that bottle of wine. Then they actually put together a very simple application so they already had video surveillance in the stores. They had the scale infrastructure there. So they wrote a little AI app that just looked to see when did someone put a bottle of wine in the shopping cart. And which is interesting enough, because if you look at some online demos, like one of the most common demos for computer vision is like it detects a bottle.
Right. Yeah,
like
exactly.
It's like open source, like it's easy to, it's like human dog bottle. I don't know why that's the case, but that's what it finds. Right. And so it's like, okay, somebody put a bottle in the shopping cart. And then what they did is they could follow that cart around and they could change the digital signage in the store based on the fact that you are more likely to buy, name brand products versus generic or what have you.
High-end cheese.
And it worked.
Right.
Yeah. And it worked. And it was, this is something that like an intern who was there for, less than 2 months pulled off. Right. And that's kind of the power of edge. I mean, you could imagine like, just if you were going to go, I don't know, source this thing out and say, hey, create this application, give me the infrastructure to do it, yada, yada, yada. I mean, it would be a multi-year project to try and pull something like that off. But once the infrastructure is in place, it becomes much, much easier.
Yeah. And deployable, then scalable and deployable across multiple factors, for sure.
No doubt.
As we stay on the edge, one other misconception I wanted to get into, because I think we touched on it a little bit, but it's around security, right? I guess people feel like, well, the cloud's uber secure, right? If anything I throw up there, it's AWS's issue, not my issue. It's secure, right? I mean, they've got it, but the edge can be just as secure, but you need to give a little bit of pause there, I guess. Can you talk about security on the edge and maybe some pro tips around that, or maybe I apologize, I don't know, maybe your solution handles all that because your platform gives people an edge up on that. What's your advice on security?
Yeah, well, any modern infrastructure like ours is going to have to be designed sort of from the inside out with security in mind.
Yep.
Right. But but yes, right. I mean, security is a real concern. I mean, one of the things at the edge is, devices tend to be much smaller. Like somebody could physically grab it and run, right? And so, what do they have in that scenario? Is all the data properly encrypted? That kind of a thing. The edge also can be, another attack vector, right? For, bad actors to come after. And so you need to have, you need to think about the edge as a mini data center, right? And so just like if you were going to stand up a new data center, well, I need, encryption and firewall and security and all that kind of stuff. You need that in place. Now, hopefully, the right platform makes that easy, like ours, but it's critical, right? That said, kind of circling back to our two roads in the woods, right? The fact that edge needs to be secure doesn't mean you should be like, well, I'm just going to stick with the cloud because, the cloud needs to be secured too.
There's exactly.
More than one person has had their cloud infrastructure, compromised,
for
right?
sure.
So it's security is an ongoing battle, right? We all know it, and you just have to stay on top of it.
Well said. Yep.
So Robert Frost poems.
Yep.
PlayStation 5.
Yes.
Hot dog apps. Wine tracking. I love talking to folks like Jeff who can take complex complex things and simplify them and give you like tangible stories that we can all understand to help out here. I think that's good practice for anyone in the sales world.
100%.
How can you take a complex subject and simplify it in a way that people can understand in order to help understand why they need what you're offering them. So good stuff. All right. Well, in a moment, we're going to let Jeff tell us a little more about how scale can actually help you and your business go out there and deliver these edge solutions. But first, a quick look at what's happening around BlueStar Nation. The 2U Tour is rolling on.
It is.
We are bringing a tech expo, inspired networking, and thought leadership to a city near you. All right, where have we been so far? We had a Miami Skyline cruise.
We did.
A combo distillery and art gallery outside of Atlanta.
I missed both those, darn it.
You've been missing all this stuff.
I missed this.
We keep sending James Cordy all this stuff, and why aren't we there? We've been to ballrooms and a racetrack in Canada, and we're only halfway through this year's stop so far. We got lots of other stuff coming up. So next up, we have another event on a yacht in Chicago coming up on June 17th.
Cruise ship seems to be a theme going on.
It is. Yes, I think we got a couple more of those this year. Yeah. I mean, who doesn't want to get on a boat and hang out for a few hours?
Go for a little cruise.
Do some networking. Check out
learn
some
about
cool
technology.
Followed by Detroit on July 8th at the Shinola Hotel. This tour is free for VARs and MSPs, but space is limited at each stop. So check out a link in the show notes to register for upcoming stops and keep an eye out for more events to come. While you're doing that, take a moment to, throw some bones our way. Throw some, likes and subscriptions. Recommend us to, friends and
maybe
colleagues.
A comment or two.
Leave us a comment. Write a review about the show. Just let us know what you like. What do you think is going on? Go check out our BlueStar Nation blog. We're doing lots of great stuff over there. Submit your ideas for the show. We want to know what you want to hear about on the show. If we're not hearing from you, we're just gonna. Dean and I mean, granted, we hit a gold mine here with Jeff, to talk about fun stuff, but it's you don't want us just making this up as we go along. We need to know what you want to hear about on the show. Yeah. So reach out to us. You can always find us on the BlueStar LinkedIn page or email us directly, nation@bluestarinc.com. All right, let's wrap up here with a little VAR value. And Jeff, this is where I want you to kind of, explain why VARs and ISVs should be working with you guys at scale. How is scale computing helping them go out and deliver these stronger solutions out on the edge and get their customers where they need to be when it comes to edge computing?
Yeah, so first as a precursor to that, I just want to say Scale is 100% channeled company. So we always go to market with VARs and MSPs.
Yes.
Yeah, no exceptions, right?
Nice.
And that's been the case the entire time. And it's because I know that, it's those partners that have that trusted relationship with the customer, right? And, one of the beauties about Edge is it does, I think, help preserve that relationship, right? They had this weird thing with the cloud where as soon as you sign your customer up with the cloud, I mean, technically, if Amazon cut you off, they're still there, right? But here now the Edge is real infrastructure and it's out there. Now, with Scale, I mean, Scale is a software company. I mean, sometimes we do sell appliances, but generally it's software that's going to run on hardware that goes out at the edge. And for partners, right, they have a couple of opportunities to engage with customers, and we've touched on them here. One of which, of course, is the edge is this new thing, right? And customers are often looking for, they may not be Googling, I need edge, right? But what they might Google is, I want that, loss prevention shoplifting application.
Yep.
Right. And so the question then becomes, okay, of course, I'm a partner. I can help you deploy that application. But let's also talk about not just that application, but the one that's going to come after that and the one that's going to come after that. Mm-hmm. And can we discuss your infrastructure that exists in those stores before we just rush ahead into a singular application and you end up with yet another one of those tower servers sitting there in the back office? The other thing, of course, that's happened is the Broadcom VMware transaction. And so there's another opportunity because many customers are out there thinking, I have to get off of the VMware bus, right? Mm-hmm. The costs are going way up. The technology roadmap's totally different. I'm looking for an alternative. Now, for any partner, of course, scale can be that alternative. And, I would be thrilled to always just engage on that front alone. However, right, what I find most effective is, okay, let's turn that conversation, which can be one almost of panic, right? You can imagine if you're the CIO and your VMware pricing just went up 5x, right? That is not a conversation you're looking forward to having in the boardroom about how that cost changed. But if you can move that conversation to, okay, we're going to get off of VMware, but also in doing so, we're going to engage in edge computing and lay the groundwork for artificial intelligence and advance this place forward, that's a much easier conversation to have. So you kind of can, get two birds with one stone in that way to talk about, yes, a path off of VMware, but also this roadmap to the future. And, from scale standpoint, we have programs for partners that range from, obviously software they can try, proof of concepts that we'll deploy for customers, pilot programs and so forth to let customers, the best sales strategy that we have is get customers hands-on with the system because they'll think that they're going to deploy traditional, on-prem infrastructure when in fact with scale, it is going to feel more like their own private cloud.
Brilliant. Well said, which is exactly why we're excited about the scale computing relationship that we're developing. This is a key component to helping enable our customers have a play, have a realistic play, respond to what's happening in the marketplace with VMware and et cetera, but also have a deployable, meaningful solution for edge compute, and everything that they're going to be stacking on it in years to come. Brilliant.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
I think if you want to be that trusted partner, if you want to be that partner 100%. That's delivering complete top to bottom solutions, this is the kind of partnership that you need to have in your corner to help you enable this new modern era of edge.
It has to. You have to.
That's it.
Yep, for sure.
Great stuff. All right. Well, hey, don't hesitate to reach out to Jeff and the folks at Scale if you are interested in this.
Jeff's a busy guy, but we can get you connected.
Exactly. Reach out to us, and we'll get you the right folks. It may not be Jeff, but we'll get you some amazing folks that will help you out. Don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to hook you up with the folks at Scale.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's wrap up as always with what's on our radar.
Yes, sir.
We're going to talk about something in the world of tech, science, business, news, innovation, just something random we feel like talking about today. So, Jeff, I'll let you kick off here. What's on your radar right now?
Lots of things. I don't know. We could talk for a long time. I think that one thing that it's related to edge in some ways, right? But AI is everywhere, obviously, right? And it touches everything. But one of the areas of AI that I think is very active, but isn't overtly talked about as much is AI assisted application development, which is a fancy way of saying people who hadn't traditionally been able to write code can now write code.
That'd be me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So there you go. So, and as we were talking about edge and, the guy that wants the hot dog monitoring app, right? Like those aren't complicated pieces of software, right? So it is exactly the kind of thing that somebody with effectively operational knowledge of what would make their environment better can use AI and create something that actually accomplishes that task. Where, again, besides the cost of deploying that app in the past, if you're going to go hire a team of engineers to build it, there's no way it would ever get done. And so you're going to see this massive explosion in the number of applications that exist generally, and not just at the edge, but everywhere, right? I mean, you could make an iPhone app in a day, right, using AI now.
Yep.
So it's a really cool area, and it's just the things are changing so quickly. The kind of app that you could use AI to create today is going to look silly compared to what it'll do even next week, right? So that's one of the areas I see.
I'm with you there. Have you ever heard of a company called Manus out of China? Manus.im is the name of the company. I was just clued into it recently, but what's wonderful, but what's cool about it is it's Gen AI. But to your point, what you do is you prompt it what your need is, and then it'll show you. It does a split screen, and it shows you on the right hand side all the code that it's creating to do what you just asked it to do. And then it's really, really fascinating. But to your point, I mean, maybe this is one of those things that you were just talking about, Jeff. It's a company that's enabling, at least a portion of what he was talking about, because I can't write code. I got ideas. No. I know how maybe I want AI to be developed, but I don't know. This world is happening so fast out there in generative AI and its ability to do that. That's crazy.
Well, crazy. And our motto on the show this year is the practical applications, and we're finally starting to see people understand how they can really make AI work for them and work for their business and everyday life, honestly.
Yeah.
All right, Dean, what's
That's
on your
radar?
That's a
good one, though. All right, I'm going back to one of your favorites, tardigrades.
Oh, all right, cool.
The little water bears. Do you know what a tardigrade is, Jeff?
I do not. No,
okay. Well, these are amazing little creatures. They're microscopic, but apparently what they're known for is that they're almost indestructible.
Yeah, they're pretty durable,
They can live in the vacuum of space. Yeah. They can absorb 1,000 times more radiation than humans can. So they're these, they look like, I don't know, they look like little water bears. I mean, the little bears, but they are microscopic. Okay, so here's the good news here. Proteins derived from tardigrades shown to help shield DNA and mouse cells from radiation.
Oh, nice.
So the whole idea is they're taking a little bit of this DNA, they're now working it in an mRNA type of scenario. But what MIT is doing with this now is what they did is they injected some of these nanoparticles that they've created through the tardigrade, what they've learned through the tardigrade DNA, and putting it into mice, of course. But then when they radiate, to cure cancer or something like that, what this does is it shields the cells around wherever they're doing the radiation using this tardigrade type DNA technology. Amazing is right. So these little fellers that are, almost nearly indestructible, we're learning from them.
Yeah.
So it's an ongoing, what's one of the things that we talked about is tardigrades from because they're just these little creatures that are
they're fascinating. We're learning so much from them. Yeah.
Can't we learn something from them? Yes, we can.
Well, now I'm going to have nightmares about an indestructible army of gummy bears coming after me. So we'll see.
That's what they look like. That's it, Jeff. They look like little gummy bears, microscopic though.
Yeah.
Indestructible. Hey, we're learning from
That's
them.
awesome.
So what's on your radar, John?
Well, I'm actually going to call back to a couple episodes ago when we had Jeff Smith on. We were talking about education.
Yes.
He made a brief reference to the fact that educators are trying to figure out how to tackle the AI of it all, and students using AI to write papers or potentially to cheat. So I came across just an interesting article about how the Blue Book is making a return. If you recall from our days back in college and high school, sometimes instructors would pull out the little mini size Blue Book, and that's what you had to write your little essay or write an exam in or write a paper in or something while you were potentially in class as a test or something on hand, and you couldn't use a computer. Of course, we didn't have those for a little while. Yeah, exactly, to do that kind of stuff on. So the idea is that, again, it's supposed to combat AI use for reports, for essays, written assignments, basically making sure that students are actually doing their own work, thinking through things on their own, and figuring out hey, this is my own thoughts and my own work. And I think it's fascinating because, we were just talking earlier, my son's just finishing up first grade today as we're recording this. It's his last day of first grade. I know that the homework world is coming down the road here in the future. And I know that comes with a lot of, a lot of nuanced complications when students are using AI, because I'm using AI in my work now.
I get
the point of it. But I also understand from a teacher's perspective, one, do students actually, are they learning anything if they're not using their own brain to figure stuff out?
Such a challenge, yeah.
If they're not working through problems and not working through solving things and not working through how to use their words to explain complex issues and are just typing a prompt into an AI and copying and pasting it.
Yeah, they're expecting the compute to be there to answer all these questions.
Yeah, exactly.
What do I need to know how to do math?
Right.
I'm just gonna, you know.
I mean, are we growing in a generation of future workers that are going to be graduating from school and basically don't know how to actually do anything with their own brains?
Yeah.
But then is that going to matter, because are we putting them into jobs where they're also just going to be using the it starts messing with your head.
It's complicated.
You start thinking like, well, where are we going with this? I also wonder, like, is there maybe a little bit of a reckoning when it comes to homework coming here too? Because there's been this discussion, I feel like, for a while now about, like, do students really need to be coming home and doing another 2, 3, 4 hours of homework after their school,
as opposed to doing it in school?
Exactly. So maybe that becomes a way we kind of start dialing back on the homework. It's like, well, if the kids are going to go home and just cheat with AI anyway.
Yeah, my 7th grader comes home with very little homework. They do almost everything in school.
There you go. I think that's fantastic. I think that's what school's supposed to be for. Right. Let's figure out how to teach them in that environment where they don't have the opportunity to, quote, cheat or take shortcuts, and they're learning, where they're supposed to. So
the Blue Book.
Yeah, I'm
what's old is new.
The Blue Book coming back. Although I will say, like, my handwriting is atrocious. And granted, even print, like, don't even ask me how to do cursive. And I don't know if kids even know how to do cursive anymore. But like, my just like normal print handwriting is probably atrocious. I don't. If someone told me, like, you have 2 hours to write a full essay, I'd be like, great. My hand's gonna be cramping and it's going to look like garbage. You're not going to understand any of it. Yeah, exactly. Just give me
it's funny. It's a balance, right? I saw an article. It was on the same kind of topic about using AI in education, and but it was a reference to like a newspaper journal article from, I don't know, 100 years ago, lamenting the fact that with the invention of calculators, no one would know how to do square roots by hand. Right. And it turns out that's okay. Like, I don't know how to do a square root by hand, but we all get by. You've got to adapt. I saw an interesting article on a school district in Texas, if I remember right, that was a really poor performing school district, and they embraced using AI to do individual learning, right? So you can go to AI and be like, teach me algebra,
right? And
it'll like take you through it. Well, students learn at different. It's almost like being like homeschooled or something, right? They learn at different paces, and all of a sudden, this particular district went from like bottom 5% to top 5%.
I'll be darned,
because using the AI. So it's a challenge, right? On one hand, you're going to be writing in the Blue Book. On the other hand, the AI is teaching algebra. Who knows?
Who knows? So,
yeah. Oh, good
we'll get
stuff.
it figured out.
Exactly. All right, that is what's on our radar this week. Jeff Reedy, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciated having you on the show. So until next time, go out, read a poem. Maybe you'll learn something from it. Talk to your customers about the edge.
Yes.
Watch out for
Don't be afraid.
Watch out for tiny gummy bears chasing your dreams, I guess. And we'll see you out there in the nation.